Yeah, good luck.
By the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lashawn. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Could we please have a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Cantu is absent today. Commissioner Marks?
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Here.
Commissioner Winkler?
Here.
And Chair Tiedemann.
Here. With that, we'll move to item number 2, which is our approval of the minutes. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes from commission members? Seeing none, any public comment on this item? Seeing none in the room, is there any online?
If you'd like to comment on the minutes, please use the raise the hand icon. Nope.
Seeing none, I will look for a motion.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Can we please have a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Yes.
Commissioner Winkler?
Yes.
And Chair Tiedemann.
Yes. With that, we will move to Good of the City. This is for persons wishing to address the commission on any item that is not on the agenda. Please note that due to state law known as the Brown Act, we are limited in our ability to take up items substantively that are not on our agenda. Therefore, they may be referred to for a brief comment or for a future agenda. And in this and all comments to the commission, please address your thoughts to the commission. Be respectful, as we want everyone to feel comfortable making their comment. Go ahead.
Good evening. I sent a letter in to your group, and it should have been posted, but it by accident was not. So it will be posted in the public record. I will speak to it. At the last meeting, you had one item on the agenda that was broken into 3 parts: anti-harassment and discrimination procedures, just cause for evictions policy, and rent stabilization. The first one had 4 specific protections, just cause had 5, rent stabilization had 6, and each one of these topics was covered in a separate meeting of yours. This was the only item on the agenda, and as I stated in the letter, you should have separated these things not under 6.1, but as 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, where as you actually acted, you, on the bucket as of each one of those, you discussed them and voted on them separately, but we, as the public, were unable to discuss those buckets in a clear manner. Instead, we had 15 things that we needed to talk about in 3 minutes, which comes down to 12 seconds per protection. And that's ridiculous to have to think that way, talk that way. You had plenty of time. You had the opportunity and could have adjusted it. And I would like you all to understand that this is possible. I've been on committees, and things have been adjusted. You wouldn't be changing the agenda. You wouldn't be adding anything to the agenda. You would be doing what you actually did: discuss 3 separate sub-items of one agenda, allowing the public that was here to properly address those 3 items. You had plenty of time. You ended it in 1 hour and 20 minutes. You could have handled it. This was a grave mistake and a suppression of public comment expression, which now will never be in the record. And if you don't acknowledge it, and then you won't learn from it as a group. And I make mistakes all the time in my work. And I go to my clients and I tell them, I screwed up, I did this, I'll fix it, it won't happen again. And they almost unilaterally say, Francesco, okay, thank you, we appreciate that, we trust you, we'll take care of it, and everything will be fine. If you don't own up to your mistakes, you're doomed to repeat them.
Thank you for your comment. Any further comments for item not on the agenda? Any on, oh, go ahead.
Good evening. I wanted to mention something that Commissioner Ramirez said at the 56-minute minute mark into the last meeting when she was discussing relocation fees in Berkeley being up to $20,000. She said, that is absurd. And she's correct. It's absurd. Sometimes it's really much more, Commissioner Ramirez. Sometimes it's $35,000. That $20,000 is actually kind of low in some cases for relocation fees. Also, Commissioner Ramirez, I want you to know over the years, I have always advocated for small landlords, people who are just renting out their house or their ADU, not to be included in this type of legislation. Nevertheless, I have always failed, and City Council has always put a giant umbrella over everyone. So I want you to know what you vote for here will be coming straight back at you. It will. So if you want to pass things down to your children, by the way, City Council just took up a transfer tax. You're going to have to pay more to pass this on to your kids. If you want to move your kid into one of your properties, your ADU, or back into a rented house, you're going to be suffering with the rest of us. So I just want you to know, one of my daughters completely lost her apartment. It burned to the ground in the Pacific Palisades fire. She lost everything. I was lucky I had a bedroom for her to move back into, but if I had needed to move her into a rental unit and had to pay $20,000 on top of her losing everything, higher tuition at UC Berkeley than where she was before, et cetera, that's just way too much to pile on us. Please consider this. Also, one of our board members just spent $100,000 on an earthquake retrofit. He made no profit at all. If he had had to move a tenant out because of the earthquake retrofit and relocate them, he would have had to pay $100,000 plus $20,000. So please, please consider your actions.
Thank you for your comment. Any further comments online?
Yes, hold on one second.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, my name is Mike Nojaji. I have been an Albany resident for 20 years. I actually missed the September meeting. I was out of town, but I did watch the entire thing on YouTube. I was completely shocked and dismayed at what I saw. The September Housing Advisory Commission meeting exemplifies the democratic erosion that is taking root both nationally and locally here in our country. What occurred at that meeting was a rushed process that bundled 15 distinct tenant protection proposals with minimal public comment. This mirrors the procedural cynicism that's increasingly seen in our national politics, particularly the Republican Party playbook in the last several years, especially this year at full force. To see the same strategy replicated at a local level is deeply troubling. It transforms our local government from a civic exercise into an echo chamber of control, essentially silencing community voices. Democracy is not merely a matter of voting or following parliamentary form. It is the cultivation of trust through transparency and inclusion. When those in power manipulate the structure of deliberation to mute opposition, they engage in the same anti-democratic habits that corrode the faith in government at every level. In the end, the question is not whether the policy suggestions were good or bad. It's whether public was allowed to provide adequate input in good faith. When process becomes a weapon to silence dissent, democracy ceases to be a dialogue and becomes an edict. And I do want to add the strategy that you see here has been played multiple times by the chair at the city council, which eventually resulted to his dismissal as a council member. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Any further online?
No.
With that, we will move to our discussion item, which is the tenant protection education measure recommendations. This is about the sort of more programmatic elements of what we've been talking about. And I will turn it over to staff for their presentation.
I apologize. We're just trying to bring up the presentation. Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. Chair Tiedemann, members of the commission, members of the public, thank you very much for being here and giving me the opportunity to present on this important matter. My name is Chris Hess, and I've been working with the Community Development Department as a consultant on housing matters, including supporting this commission. I will be speaking tonight about kind of a collection of different issues that have been coming up across the Housing Advisory Commission's meetings this year. Many of them relate to tenant protections, but in particular, the outreach, education, and enforcement pieces. Last meeting, we spoke a lot about what a potential tenant protection ordinance could look like. Now, some of the things we'll talk about tonight may have ideas that would theoretically fall into a tenant protection ordinance or not, but generally we were trying to collect together the commission's interest in getting information out there, whether about local ordinances or about tenant and landlord law from the state level in the discussion tonight. And I think it's very important because many of our commissioners are, yes, thank you. Anything related to programs of the city, Leslie reminds me. Thank you very much. So the purpose of the discussion is to gather input on these 4 general matters that relate to programs. One is improvements to the city's existing rent review program. Secondly, systems to improve business license compliance among property owners. 3 is city-provided free or low-cost legal counsel for Albany renters and property owners, which does not currently exist, but is something that we've discussed. And 4 is education and outreach for renters and property owners of other types. Similarly to our discussion of tenant protection ordinance possibilities, last time this will be collected together in a report, which is an advisory report, and presented to the City Council in the early part of the next calendar year. A few matters of this discussion I want to be sure that folks are aware of. The way that the agenda is set up is that we are considering this education, outreach, and programs a single agenda item. It covers multiple related subtopics. There's going to be one staff presentation, which I'm in the midst of right now, and then a single public comment period. The commission will discuss the entire item after that public comment occurs. So the first area up for discussion is the City of Albany's rent review program. With each of these, I'll be trying to just lay out a few of the bullets of the lay of the land and what's important for the public and for what the commission has already noted, and then some of the commission feedback that occurred when we discussed this in our meetings. So, in regards to the rent review program, this is a program that's administered by Echo Housing to help tenants and property owners resolve rent increase disputes. It provides early consultation, mediation, and conciliation services on the request of the tenant in the event of a qualifying rent increase. The outcomes of this, however, are advisory. It is a non-binding mediation process. The funding for this is a $15 per unit annual fee, which is collected through our business licensing process. Property owners do have responsibilities, even though it is a non-binding mediation, which include that they must inform tenants of the rent review rights when they issue a rent increase, and that participation is mandatory. They do have to come, even if they do carry on with the rent increase and a mediation agreement is not reached. If a landlord were not to attend a mediation, the rent increase would be invalidated. So when we discussed this at our June 4th meeting, here's a couple of the items that came up and observations that your commission made. One is that there's few mediations and conciliations, usually in the neighborhood of 4 to 8 per year, but more recently, more like 4 of these processes where Echo Housing has actually facilitated something between landlord and tenants. And that did indicate to commissioners a limited usefulness of the program. We did note that there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 60 in recent years contacts that tenants or landlords made for information that did not turn into a mediation or conciliation, and that Echo did log as kind of a precursor to this process. Your commission did question the program effectiveness for education, and particularly concerns that because the mediation outcomes are non-binding, that may limit the effectiveness and might increase the concern on the part of the tenants that they are inviting retaliation without much potential gain. There was also a great concern that neither tenants nor landlords were very aware of the program or their responsibilities under it. And one thing that I think everyone did agree on pretty strongly was that people should be paying the fees and should be participating in the business license process if they are renting a unit in Albany, and not every unit is currently under that business license process. So that brings me to item 2, which is that business licensing process and the registering that's implied of rental units in the requirement that owners obtain a business license. So every year, owners must obtain a business license that covers the units. They must pay a per unit rent review fee. There's a fire inspection fee and other services that have a city fee underneath them. Property owners are, in the majority, complying with the process. We estimate that 72% of the city's eligible rental units do have an owner with an eligible business license for that unit that's current. That does leave 28% or so that are not in compliance with this process. And there's not currently an enforcement mechanism going out there from the city on that. We did want to note that sometimes, especially when we talk about rent stabilization, the notion of a rental registry on the part of the city comes up. Many of our nearby cities do manage what we refer to as a rental registry, which is where the landlord is obligated to send information about the tenancy, about the rent amount, other items that would allow for the city to enforce landlord-tenant law at that unit and have a base of information. Usually in cities like that, they pay much more than a $15 fee for that because it is a much more involved process and involves a different administrative system than what the City of Albany has to just track the participation in the fees. We don't collect that data. We don't collect data on tenancies or rental amounts. There's no history of the rental of a unit that would assist the city in any type of enforcement through the business licensing process. It's much more stripped down. So, you know, if the commission wanted to recommend a rental registry, that could be a higher level of information gathering. That does not necessarily imply that you're also wanting a rent stabilization program. They sometimes go together, but it could be for just the purpose of getting that information and history in order to track that for public policy purposes. The commission feedback when we covered this at various meetings, really, particularly at the rent stabilization meeting, was that there are certain benefits of a more robust registry, which would be improved transparency around the rental market, tracking of trends, reporting, and enforcement, but there are also concerns. It would cost more. There's more administration that's involved in ensuring that folks comply with it and the data is entered. Being able to update the data such that there's data quality and potential privacy concerns out there that it does build a database of Albany renters, of Albany landlords that does not currently exist. There was once again a consensus that the current business licensing process, that everyone 100% should be participating in that. And that much of your commission did support the notion that if the current business license is not obtained, that there could be some consequence of that in owners being able to take actions, such as increase the rent, maybe evict a tenant, if they fail to maintain that business license. The third subtopic that we're discussing is around city-sponsored legal assistance. So this was discussed at our July meeting. We talked about how access to legal assistance significantly improves housing stability and case outcomes. If tenants have a lawyer in the eviction process, 85 to 90% of them do remain housed ultimately, and it's much less if they don't. There are regional organizations, nonprofits, that are providing this type of service to different constituencies, including Eviction Defense Center, East Bay Community Law Center, Centro Legal, and HERA, Housing Rights Advocates. Those organizations collectively provide different levels of counseling, workshops, and up to full representation. As we discussed, though, our discussions with those organizations indicate that most tenants trying to receive free services, such as those that Albany tenants would be trying to receive potentially, would not be experiencing full representation. They may get a phone call, they may get counseling at the courthouse, they're probably having to file their own paperwork. But it all depends upon when they come in and what the capacity of East Bay Community Law Center is at the time that they happen to be coming in. And that has caused cities like Berkeley and Oakland to create contracts with those organizations to ensure a minimal level of representation for any of their renters that come in. So the feedback that your commission gave at the July meeting were, once again, that these services are not known to many Albany renters. They're not known to many Albany property owners as well. There was some commission support for having a city-funded assistance program. No specific source was identified for that. And your commission was very strong in the consensus that what was good for tenants was also good for property owners, and would be really great to have some upstream legal support for property owners to ensure that they were completing their responsibilities well, and with legal support that low-income property owners should have access to that type of representation if we're providing it to tenants. There was a lot of interest in workshops with legal partners where a lawyer from an organization like East Bay Community Law could come and provide a workshop for tenants, and separately probably a workshop for property owners in the city that would be free. And a recognition that there's a lot of benefits to prevention, but that does cost money up front. Then finally, we have discussed throughout every one of our meetings the need for education and outreach. We've had a lot of survey feedback and anecdotal feedback that show that renters and property owners in the city really don't know much about their housing resources, state law requirements that they have in regards to each other. Renters are particularly unaware of the rent review program, how to access it. Owners are often unaware of notice, fee, and registration obligations. There is, maybe very importantly, a limited understanding of just cause and rent cap rules that do exist statewide under AB 1482 and SB 567. Those are applicable even in the absence of any rent stabilization or just cause ordinance in the city. There is uncertainty as to where to seek legal assistance and confusion about the eviction notice timelines and enforcement, which oftentimes results in tenants not actually fulfilling their rights as they experience an eviction process. Some pieces of feedback across many meetings in regards to the commission. Your commission has been very excited about this topic and doing more education and outreach. There's an agreement that it's needed, a broad support for more multilingual materials that the city puts together and ensures distribution of. A preference for holding separate workshops in the city for renters and property owners, and potentially in using that business license process that we've discussed to improve on outreach. That concludes the topics here. We'll move into the public comment phase. Just to once again note that in January or February of 2026, we expect that these recommendations will be presented to City Council in a report that will be talking about the ordinance development issues that we talked about last time, as well as programmatic initiatives, enhanced enforcement, and education items that we may be able to do. So thank you all very much, and we'll turn to the next phase. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions from committee members? Commissioner Marks?
I want to know exactly how did you get the 72% number? How did you determine that that was the number?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. It is, we looked into the database of all the different fees that were paid, that we were able to get a report covering a year's time, and then we filtered it for rent review fee. There was other fees in there, but that was simply a matter of counting up the number of rent review fees that were paid, all of which were part of the business license process. Then, as we did...
I'm sorry, you've lost me a little bit.
Okay, sorry about that.
You went through, you looked at like who paid for a business license? I mean, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, and then of those that paid for a business license, who said that they had a rental unit, registered the unit?
So we received the information from finance on all business license pays, and you can call them out by rental units, and from that determine how many paid the rental fee.
So you know exactly how many rental units are in Albany?
No, we don't. What we are using is the estimate of rental units that is in the housing element. So part of our foundation is a lack of absolute certainty on how much it is, and also just a slight correction is the data we got is through September, whatever data was printed last month. So it wasn't quite a year, but most business license are paid in the beginning of the year. So but that tracked very similarly to the previous data we had from last year of about what we estimate to be about a 70% compliance.
Yeah, I'm also curious on recommendation 2. You mentioned that for example, the $15 that is used to cover the rent review program, that I think you mentioned that they wouldn't, cover the rent registry or a similar program. So is there any sense, or have you done any research to give you a ballpark figure of what it would cost?
Yes, definitely. So at the time that we did the staff report on rent stabilization, we looked at this and we had several different peer cities. The least robust of rent registries that we found was San Francisco, where the fee was $50 per unit per year. The most robust fees were in Richmond and Berkeley, which have a lot of activity around enforcement and proactive enforcement. And so they are very thorough in this, and those were in between $200 and $300 per unit per year.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Out of this 72% or whatever, what is the total that was collected in those $15 checks for the rent review fee? What was the total collected for that category?
This is going to be an estimate, but I seem to recall it being about $32,000 to $33,000 per year.
Okay, and we had 4 cases that used it. Is that right?
Yes, that's the number that we're billed for. Yes.
So $8,000 per case, roughly. Seems like good use of money, guys. No? Yeah. Okay. I'm being sarcastic, but so if there's a pool of money like that, you need to raise the fees to be more robust yet? In other words, you're collecting a lot already. So maybe you allocate that to those guys and you leave the fees where they are and you see how many people use it. It just seems like a pretty high cost per deal.
So we're going to keep that for the discussion portion, and I'd like you to bring that up again. But I do want to reiterate that the contract we have with Echo Housing, they do a lot more than the 4 conciliations and more than the 8 mediations. They do quite a bit of just counseling and answering questions regarding state law. So what you're seeing, if you're comparing it to I will come back at some time with the hours they spent, because they don't even charge us for most of the hours. So
I think that would be interesting to find out. What are we using? I mean, I have attorneys, I pay retainers,
Correct,
and I
yeah.
get so many hours for it, right? And I know what I'm getting. So if we're spending $33,000 a year, we should know what we're getting for it.
And we do. We just haven't
Before we
presented
raise
that.
fees, and we
Correct.
suggest we raise fees, we should know that. Because if we're going to just raise fees without knowing that, that's just unnecessary tax.
Any more questions from commission members? Seeing none, we will go for public comment. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? We'll start in the room.
Yeah, thank you. I think the goals of the Housing Advisory Commission being discussed this evening are real concerns. I believe they are a starting point for a longer discussion about what the actual community needs are and how to satisfy them. The tenant goals and needs need to align with the needs and goals of the rental providers. Tenants need a place to live. Rental providers fill that need. Neither can exist without the other. There is no place for an adversarial relationship between the two. For this reason, it is essential that the HAC work with the rental providers rather than against them. You do your best, but I respectfully submit that you do not have as much knowledge and expertise about the rental business as do the providers. For this reason, I urge you to look at how your deliberations are conducted. There is no way multi-million-dollar decisions can be made in a short 2 or 3 hour meeting. You have weeks or months to think about and research what you are going to discuss at these meetings. You have months to think about your prejudices and philosophical leanings about the issues to be discussed. We as rental providers have at most 3 or 4 days to learn about what is scheduled to be discussed, to research the topics, and try to figure out what your position and position statements will be. Then during the meetings, we have at most 3 minutes to make comments and suggestions on your proposals. Your ideas and concerns might be good. You believe they are in the public interest. But, and this is important, they are your ideas and are not necessarily the best they could be. I have yet to see any hard evidence that tenants are abused by their providers. You have been asked for such evidence many times, but nothing has ever been provided other than anecdotal evidence. This doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it just has not been provided. So going forward, I would hope you can consider the following. Since 3 minutes does not provide enough time for you to learn anything new, how about setting up one or more workshops where there can be a free exchange of thoughts and ideas, a time where differing opinions can be hashed out and perhaps some common ground can be found. It seems to me this would be much more productive, could result in some real solutions to any real problems that may exist, and prevent adversarial confrontations at the HAC meetings and at the council meetings. So finally, thank you for your dedication. I hope we can become collaborators and not adversaries.
Thank you for your comment.
I want to reiterate that I'm neither a tenant or a landlord. I've just been working in this field for 37 years. And I've heard from all different kinds of buyers and sellers and renters and landlords about why they come here to Albany to live and to rent and to own. But I haven't heard here, and I was hoping this time in particular, because there should be some representation here by the tenants. I wish those of you up there had the opportunity to do some kind of outreach, because there's nothing in today's agenda that a tenant couldn't come and discuss freely without fear of repercussions, which is the reason that I keep hearing about, that they're afraid to come in here to speak. And we're getting, it's hard for me to take some of these second and third hand testimony about what happened to people and where they are, when we have 50% of the people in Albany are tenants, over 50%, and they're not here. Please make a better effort to get the people that you hope to help to come in and speak for themselves. Then we could get educated about what they're thinking about. I mean, that's this huge, empty bit of information in all of these meetings. Most of the people who speak on behalf of the tenants are not tenants, but advocates. That doesn't help inform you about what's really happening. Education, I actually have experience working with tenants on leases and with property owners on leases. And they do need to understand how those things work. And I want you to understand, again, that the more complicated you make the rules, they're not going to understand it unless they're ultra professionals and corporate people, and you're making it so complicated that the average person will not be able to navigate through the morass of these regulations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
I just wanted to ask you, I'm pretty sure also when a tenant moves in, we are legally required to notify them of the rent review program. That wasn't on your slide. But just to let you know, when you have a new tenant, you must also notify them. When you give them a rental increase, if you choose to do that, you must notify them. If you don't, my understanding is that that rental increase is null and void. Is that correct? Okay. So I do have some suggestions. I've called Echo Housing myself and tried to get a pulse on who's calling in, what are the issues, and I've suggested that maybe at the point of that initial contact, you could attempt to get a little bit more information from the tenant. Are you living in a single-family home, for example? Are you in an ADU? Are you in a large apartment building? What are the conditions? You could even ask them, what are the conditions? You've often wondered about that. There's so many questions you could potentially ask a tenant when they reach out to you. One of those 60 phone calls is if you don't ask these questions, that's a lost opportunity. And I don't think you should lose any more opportunities. Because when one of these folks who's renting a house, let's say, or an ADU, makes a mistake because they don't know the law, it just makes us, and us who are trying to represent property owners, look bad. So we've got to try and do better in terms of outreach. As I said, we tried at the Solano Stroll. I hope you guys did too. And let me see what else. I want to mention also, there are very, very, very few evictions in Albany altogether. When you finally did get those numbers from Alameda, was it like 4? It was teeny. So we know that there's like maybe 4 people who have gone through the rent review program. We know maybe there's 4 evictions. Do we really need to have a robust program here in Albany when we have so few known issues? That's what I'm thinking. Let's not create a giant bureaucracy to handle 4 to 8 cases a year. Let's just try and do better in terms of education. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your comment. I will now go online.
Hello, my name is Mike Sojaji. I want to talk about two items that was on the agenda. One was the existing rent review program. The rent review program was designed as an educational and conciliatory mechanism, not as a quasi-judicial process. The program's advisory nature encourages collaboration and resolution, making outcome not necessarily binding, but if you go the path of trying to make outcome binding, implies punitive consequences for disagreements. City's own data suggests that not that the program is failing. It really doesn't say that. It really means that most tenants and landlords already resolve the issues without intervention. I hear a lot of things that it's not working, but it's the exact opposite. Success should be measured by stability, not by volume of complaints. This is really, really important for people to understand. Albany's housing stock is really small. Expanding city staffing, data management, and compliance monitoring for a low volume program would consume and sacrifice housing dollars that's better directed elsewhere. Also, AB 1482 already caps rent increases and defined fair procedures. Reinventing the process locally duplicates many conflict with the state laws and create confusion at landlords. Confusion. Focus should be on education and outreach, ensuring both tenants and landlords understand existing rent caps and review rights. Second topic I want to talk about is the low-cost counsel, legal counsel for Albany renters and property owners. This is dubious, and this was brought up at City Council. This is really meant for renters, not property owners. Usually don't need that. While access to legal advice is valuable, a municipal legal aid system is beyond Albany's financial administrative capacity. Albany's population is under 20,000, it's a 1 square mile, and establishing a city-level legal program would divert funds from essential services that are already served by regional providers. State and county fund organizations already provide free and reduced cost services. The city's role should be connect residents to those resources, not to replicate them under municipal management. Do not replicate. Instead, increasing, the better resolution is instead creating a cost legal apparatus. The city should focus on education, partnership, and resource mapping, linking residents to existing nonprofit legal services. A municipal legal aid may sound compassionate, but it's fiscally unsound, administratively unnecessary. City will remain an impartial conveyor, not an ideological participant in landlord-tenant disputes.
Thank you for your comment. Next up.
Hi, good evening, Housing Commission. My name is Saya Faraktala. I'm a housing provider here in the City of Albany. I have a couple of things I'd like to present or discuss. I have to say that the last Housing Commission meeting, I was shocked, quite honestly, at how business was conducted. The public got very little comment, or very little time, if any, to make public comment. And I was very disappointed in, we have one landlord representative there. And it's a very biased housing commission. And quite honestly, majority of the members, with the exception of Mr. Tiedemann, don't have any experience in property management and actually all the legislation and restriction that we abide by today. I would like to make a suggestion that anyone who in the future would like to sit on the Housing Commission takes a certification course in property management, even as a renter, so that it's more fair and that you can understand what we actually go through from the inception of a prospect all the way to a move out, and what that takes, and what an eviction actually looks like, and why evictions take place, and so on, and how rents are set and why they're set. I am really disappointed to see that our representative is consistently railroaded. He's offering up very tried, true, standard, measured proposals to assist in rent stabilization if that is the way that the city wants to go. And I feel like we don't hear him out because I think there's a real lack of understanding as to where he might be coming from. I also wanted to mention that, and this is not going to be a favorite subject, but I would like to bring it up. There seemed to be a lot of self-interest with the rest of the commission in the last meeting, especially in regards to ADUs and means testing. Means testing is meant to create a fair environment, just as Section 8 does it, because as Mr. Winkler had pointed out last time, you don't want a doctor who's making $300,000 being in an apartment where a single mom with 2 children who'd like to also be in the school district could afford it. You don't want them locking up that apartment. And then also in regards to ADUs, if we're all going to be put under these restrictions, then everybody, it's fair housing, right? What I do for one, I have to do for all. So if that's the approach that we're going to take, if we're not going to take that approach, then I can't see this being a very fair commission to the landlords. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any further comments online?
If anyone else wishes to speak, please use the raise the hand icon.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. And to clarify, we are not necessarily taking votes on anything tonight. This is sort of more general feedback that will all be included in the advisory report that will go to the council.
Correct. Staff's great goal would be to get as many recommendations as well as hear kind of contrary points to recommendations, that we get all points of view and are able to forward that to council, especially for education and outreach. I don't think there's going to be any bad idea out there, so anyone who can think out of the box, let us know, because that's what we're trying to gather here.
Thank you. And yes, I would encourage commission members to give their thoughts on specifics or generalities, and if you need to, we can rehash things we've already discussed at previous meetings that we've hopefully touched on most things involved in all of these issues. So starting with the review program, does anyone have any thoughts they want to share to start us off? I heard some over there earlier.
You need me to repeat what I said, or do you have it for the minutes? Want to hear it again?
If you can just summarize it now
Sure.
that we're.
So my question was, how much are we collecting? The number was roughly 33,000. We had 4 people use the service, so it seems like it's well funded. And my approach would be, there's no need yet to increase it because it seems like there's a lot of money there. Let's offer the tenants, want to offer them more use, great, but I don't think there's a need to raise the tax when you have these sort of funds. And you guys had said you would check with ECHO to see how much time they're spending. And it's important, I think, to parse paralegal advice versus attorney advice and who conducts these mediations. I don't know, is it an attorney, is it a pro tem judge, is it a paralegal, or is it somebody like a real estate broker that sits down with both parties and says, this is rent, this is what your rights are, how is that negotiated, how are they compensated? I think we should know that before we look at Berkeley's or Richmond's super high fees. That's my comment on that.
I'd just be curious in terms of the cost of some of this different, and this is not going to be just related to the rent review, because I feel like the rent review and the rent registry almost seem to go, I don't know, not hand in hand, but they're related. But I'd be curious if we could get kind of a breakdown of what it would cost, like for the different elements of it, because there's an education component, there's the legal counseling component, and so, and there's, the outreach component. So I think, I feel like a lot of this is just theoretical, because without really knowing how much of each of the elements would cost, and to really understand how much you get for the money, it's just, I don't know, a little bit hard to really think concretely on some of these elements.
I appreciate that point. I wanted to add on the subject of cost, especially for rent registry programs, but for all of these, a lot of it depends on how intensive cities want to be in terms of staffing. There's a wide variety, like staff mentioned, in terms of how many full-time equivalents you've got just doing a rent registry, doing other things, and that. So we could get sort of ballparks of those things, but a lot of it would depend on how sort of active the city council decided it should be, how that rent registry was contracted out, of who was doing it, and if the people then fulfilling it are employees of the city, how many of them are there per rental, per 1,000 rental units, and what other tasks they're doing. Because you can go the maximalist approach like Berkeley, where they've got a lot of people working for their rent review board, or you can go a sort of more scaled back version that may be more right for cities with less resources. But so yes, I agree with you, but it's also, there's ranges within that.
And I have one other thing. Wouldn't it be interesting if we took some of the $33,000 and actually had education, use that to educate tenants and landlords about the rules in Albany and the rules in the state, and see how that changes compliance and need for rent review? In other words, if you educate the people, they still need to come in for a rent review and that sort of thing. Maybe by using that money to educate and inform, you would avoid the 4 or 8 cases a year.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good question, and I actually would go with the idea that I think the rent review program, as it's been presented, has proven a more effective education tool than it has a mediation tool. And I'm generally of the opinion that I don't think mediations in this context are usually that effective or that utilized, whereas it's much more important to have that education and counseling when people call, and that seems like what they're getting when they call, and that's the main return on our investment we're doing. So if I had my druthers, we would say, we don't need you to run a rent review program anymore and run mediation. You're folded into a larger conversation about how much education and outreach we need, and that ECHO could be an important part of that in terms of answering people's questions and doing that counseling that they've been doing more so than they've been mediating.
Right, it might be the right way to do it. In other words, I'm going back to my earlier thing, it's like there's no need to increase the fees here. Let's see how we can use what we're collecting and make it more effective.
Commissioner Marks, sorry, I went before you.
All right. Under the improve the rent review, I mean, I've been clear about this, and I still believe that it needs to just be CPI, and we don't have to worry about people reviewing the rent. But under the registration of units, I looked at what other cities were doing, and the city of San Leandro, when the city passed the rent registry, what they said was the city does not currently track residential units. There's no source for obtaining comprehensive rental material data specific to San Leandro. Whereas a rent registry program would help the city collect data regarding rent and other relevant information about rental units, and it would further inform the city council about housing stock trends and rental market generally. The city government has a substantial interest in regulating the relationship between property owners and tenants in order to provide certainty, stability, and fairness. So I think that a rental registry is a good thing. Actually, I want to back up a little bit. I just want to say something to Mr. Campbell. I think I get the agenda at the same time you do. It gets sent out to the public, and I feel like I don't have enough days to prepare, like for the meeting. So I really identify with you on that one. We're at simpatico about that issue. Okay, back to the rent registry. So I looked at the rent registry for the city of Alameda. It's for each unit, it's half a page. You know, it just says number of bedrooms, the occupant, date, start date of the tenancy, date of last rent increase, rent charged, tenant's name, first name and last name, and that's what it asks for. I think when we are looking at, there's a couple things we're looking at, how do we get the landlords to comply? And I did pass this sheet out. It's the city of San Leandro now has a draft of a rent control rent program out. It's out for public comment right now. The draft was done July 10th, 2025, and that's what's on the sheet. So they have penalties and remedies for violation. They also have a section, landlord's failure to comply. And they allow people to sue the landlord and get emotional distress or whatever. I think that the other thing that could be done to make sure landlords comply, if they were told, if we find out you're not registered, the city's going to make you lower the rent. I mean, I think that would be an incentive for a landlord to say, I need to register. I need to do this. I think $15 is very inexpensive. I did look up rental fees in other cities. So Berkeley is high. They have a rent board. It goes from $344 to $53, depending upon what kind of unit it is. Richmond is high also, $267. City of Alameda is $170 or $114 or zero if it's a Section 8 housing. Two cities that I know of, and maybe other cities do this too, El Cerrito and Alameda, allow the landlord to charge back 50% of that fee back to the tenant. Alameda, it's done by, they do it each month until they run out of the whole thing. El Cerrito, they could do it 2 times a year. Every 6 months, they could give the tenant an increase to pay for this, to pay for 50% of the fee. So really, I mean, Albany landlords are paying, a very low fee. Okay, El Cerrito is $49. I called some of these cities to say, okay, what are you doing to get landlords to comply? The person I talked to in the city of El Cerrito was really honest and said nothing. They're not doing anything. They just started the program. They want to do something, but they're not doing anything. So, I think there's that. And I think we need to do something. So I would, when you talk about tenants coming forward, I talk to a lot of tenants. I run a weekly program with low-income residents in Albany, and I see tenants at that program. And honestly, the things that they complain about are if they complain to their tenant about mold, the tenant's going to evict them or raise their rent or do all kinds of things or whatever they're complaining about. That's the main issue that I hear from tenants with the landlords. They're afraid. They're afraid to bring forward. They don't want their rent raised. They're afraid to bring forward issues with the building. I hear that all the time. And people are afraid. It's a small city. They are intimidated by their landlords. There's a power. You know, the landlords just have more power, and the tenants are powerless, basically.
But Margie, if they don't tell us, how will we know?
Hey, thank you.
Well,
Margie, can I ask a question?
sure.
You said you have weekly tenant meetings?
No, I run a weekly program for low-income people in Albany.
Program. Is there a chance that I could come to one of those?
Absolutely.
Because I would be happy to talk to tenants about how to.
I think, you know, I would tell you language is there's a huge Tibetan population. I mean, not Tibetan, Nepali population. So you need to get a translator who speaks
I have
their.
two Nepali employees.
Oh, well, it would be, I would love for you to come. I'll talk to you about it afterwards, but.
I'd like to see what these tenants are going through and what they're saying and who the owners are, where the address, because I don't mind talking to the owner of the building and saying, hey, Joe, your people are complaining about mold and they're scared. So I don't mind doing that.
Well, that may help those tenants, but, you know, what about all the thousands of others? So in the city of San Leandro, which just has this draft out, it says program cost impacts. So this is October 2025, so it's very current. The city retained a consulting firm to conduct a cost analysis to determine potential program costs and budget. Program cost evaluation will include an analysis of cost recovery through fees and staffing levels necessary to effectively administer the program. And it goes on to typical rent stabilization programs costs covered by fees, program administration, staff salaries, benefits, consulting, hearing officers, staffing support, legal, public information, and other. So, you know, I think the fees could be structured in a way that they could cover some of the things that we want to do. When we're talking about the education part, I brought the copy of the Albany Activity Guide.
Margie, can I pause you? Because I want to give some structure
I'm sorry.
to
Okay,
our
yeah.
talk. No, that's okay. So I wanted to just check if there's any other thoughts. We verged into it already, but on the registry and licensing part of things before we move on to the other two. Further thoughts? Something I'll remember it at some point. Please
Okay,
go on
so-
and launch us into the next bit.
All right, this is the latest Albany, well, not the latest, but from this year. There is one paragraph about the rent review program. I applaud them for doing this, but I think it's a program that the city needs to just sock people in the face with it. I think like a 2-page spread that says renters and tenants, important information for you. When I first moved to the city, probably the first 20 years I worked here, I was working 7/24 and never read the activity guide or anything else that was going on in Albany. So my fear is that people don't know about that. The other thing I would like the city to do is put up a banner across Solano and Masonic, a huge banner, to schedule a meeting and put a huge banner up that says about that meeting for renters and tenants. And it has to be done in such a way that the tenants feel protected. The last time Albany had a joint tenant-landlord gathering was here at City Hall when they were going through the rent review. I don't think any tenants showed up. So there has to be a way to make the tenants feel safe to show up. Hold on just a second. The multilingual, Albany is 30% Asian. That's the group it's only 4% Hispanic, but it's 30% Asian. And that's the group that I've found that there's language. When they're standing in line for the food bank at the high school, I can't communicate with those people. There's a language barrier. So I think at least in the Asian languages, we need to put something out for people to explain, what the procedures are. Just a minute, I'm sorry. I have so many things here. See, I didn't have enough time to prepare for this meeting, so. That's it, thank you.
Other thoughts on education outreach?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there may be more opportunities to partner with the school district, because I know there is a lot of families who move to the district, are renting and are sending their kids to school. So I just hope, just like there is the Berkeley Food Network, it runs the pantry through the school district. I'm just wondering if there's more ability to partner with them, since yeah.
I think that's a fabulous idea. I think that's where our renters are. Their kids are in our schools.
Other thoughts on education outreach? Mike, thank you.
I just have an odd question. How many illegal units do you think there are in the city?
I'm sorry, did you say legal or illegal?
Illegal, unpermitted units.
Unpermitted unit. So are we talking about ones that don't have a business license then?
Not that. No, that they're not legal.
We don't know.
We
don't know.
Because I think part of, like, if I'm renting an illegal unit, I'm definitely keeping my mouth closed because I don't want to get evicted because it's illegal, right? That sort of thing. So I'm wondering if that's a large percentage or not. I'm just curious. It's a question.
Can I just add one other thing going forward? I think we need to come up with a definition of what a mom and pop landlord is. Because to me, a mom and pop is one that lives in a duplex and rents out the other one, or they rent an ADU. It might be something completely different, but if you want us to look at maybe different rules for different types of landlords, I think we need to define that going forward and how we're going to treat it.
On the education outreach piece, yeah, I would agree with a lot of what's been said of, having more ways to get to people. I know it's always difficult in city communications to do that. We can flood the zone with as many activity guides and whatnot as we want, but it still relies on people to read them and open up the e-news or open up the Albany newsletter, which is tricky. People are busy. They don't always engage with their city resources or what's going on. And so figuring out as much as we can, any additional targeted resources, having the resources when people do reach out, like I mentioned with Echo Housing and what they've done with the mediation program being more about giving people that counseling, I think is really beneficial. On the registry, yeah, I think there's probably some unpermitted units that are people, that's probably a reason that people are not registering. I think that's definitely true. I think unpermitted ADUs are a thing that have grown more common over the past couple of decades, and luckily people have tools to bring those into compliance. It's easier than ever with state and local law, but it's going to be a tricky one to get people.
I just wonder if that's where the tenants that are afraid are the ones that are in the illegal unit. Because I deal in this business every day. We manage 250 doors in the East Bay. And we don't have these tenants with these outrageous issues. I mean, I just don't see it, right? And since I've been on this commission for however how many months it's been, I think we've heard from 3 tenants on calls. I don't think they've ever come in here. Nobody's had our sign with the rent's too damn high sitting in the chair like they do in Oakland or in Berkeley. It doesn't seem like there's this massive crisis here. And I just worry that we are creating a problem where one doesn't exist. And maybe temerity and patience and a longer process to see how it evolves is better. I don't know, were you shocked to hear that there was $33,000 collected for four hearings? Did that number surprise you?
No, but that's likely because I've seen that number a couple times.
Okay, but to me, it surprised me, right? I had no idea that it was that much and that's what's, so again, using resources, like if it was me, if I was the king of Albany, no pun, if I had 4 people that needed rent review and I had $33,000, I'd try to feed the homeless or house the homeless or feed the hungry or do something like that with the money and not use it. 4 people, sit down here in the room, we'll talk. I'll get to you in a minute, but let's go house some of the homeless or feed the hungry with that money. That money seems to me it could be better used, I think.
I think it's misleading to say that the 4 cases cost us that much money. Like Aaron said, I know people, Lade called Echo Housing. I know many tenants that call Echo Housing to get advice and counsel. So that's part of what we're paying for. Only the most, I would assume, severe cases go to mediation, but the others, they're able to settle before that. And Echo plays a role in doing that.
Because we're 30% short, we're collecting 72%, 33,000, add another half, it's 45 grand. That's a lot of money. Is it used the right way? Or should we take some of that money and have a landlord and tenant fair and say, hey, this is state law, this is local law, here's how you can get help, and try to fix it by talking to these people. Like, I want to come argue to your tenant workshop because that's not a workshop. Whatever that is,
Yes.
you're doing, because I'd like to hear it, I'd like to know who the owner is, and I go talk to him, because he may not, or she may not understand what she's not doing and what the problem is. As an owner, you don't want mold in the unit. It is a catastrophic health situation that's bad. You want to get that fixed immediately. It's terrible. So I can't imagine that people are afraid to say something about it. Both of you. So I'd like to see that,
No, that was all on topic. I would just, to one of your points of, why are we spending this money on homelessness? I would point out the city does spend a lot more than $30,000 on homeless support services. Yeah.
You gotta allocate funds, right? You're looking at your budget, like that movie with Kevin Kline, Dave, where he was going through the federal budget and we don't need 10 bombers, we can do fine with 5. Let's go house these people.
Yes, I appreciate that. Any specific, the only one we haven't really covered is the legal assistance one. Any specific thoughts anyone wants to share on that?
I think that legal assistance is good for both the tenant and the landlord, and that it would help everyone to get legal assistance. It would just be a better process if they got good advice. So, yes, both sides.
And I don't think you have this restriction on how they order assistance. If they can get an answer to a question, great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd also point out on this 2 things. Of one, it's been questioned, do we need this? I would say we do. If we look at the data on this of the existing service pool there is, which the one that we're covered by here is the Alameda County-wide one. The capacity is not up to the need overall in the county. We've got 261 eviction filings in a year per attorney who works on it. The case that's doable in a reasonable period of time is about 50 to 60. So that's, I would say, why so many cities around us have invested more in that service, even if there is a backstop of some amount of services. And the county itself has invested more money in that for specifically the unincorporated county, because they know that the blanket catch-all of the services that are provided aren't fully up to the capacity. I'd also say we can do that probably in a fairly efficient way because like I said, those are usually contracts that are executed with the existing service providers, usually the ones who run through AC Housing Secure, the countywide agency that does this, or the service that does this, to just expand services within that city. So it's not creating a lot more, bureaucracy or anything. It's adding to the existing capacity through an existing program, which I think is needed in a lot of places. Any other thoughts on that legal assistance note, or if there aren't other thoughts before we move forward? Staff, do you have what you need from us? Glad to hear it. With that, thank you to all the commission members for their discussion, and I look forward to the summary report that will be presented to the council, including this and all of our comments from all of the meetings that we've had on all these topics before. With that, we'll move to announcements. Are there any staff or commissioner announcements?
Yes, so just to next steps again, we will be consolidating what we heard with a little bit more analysis of cost, benefit, like resource requirements. So when we present it to council, we will be asking for direction. Once we get direction on what they want, we will be bringing it back to this commission and that's where we'll have actual, when I say actual recommendations of perhaps an ordinance, perhaps program amendments, whatever it is, it will be based on council. So stay tuned for that. So you're on hiatus until then. I did send to all of you a notice about a regional fair housing training that is tomorrow that is being put on by Echo Housing. So that's the regional fair housing training. So if you are interested in attending at this point, I think you should do a Google search for that, but it is tomorrow from 10 a.m. to noon. The other thing, just because it was brought up about illegal units, I will say that the state's new ADU amnesty, so it's only related to amnesties of ADUs, it was extended this year. So any ADU that can be shown to have been in existence before January 1st of 2020 can apply for an amnesty program. It can still apply just to have it not just legalized. And what the legalization is, it doesn't require building code compliance. It requires that inspection to ensure that it's not substandard housing, and it legalizes it from any penalties or fee or anything else. So that is there, and we have our first ADU illegal unit, so there is one, but hopefully we'll get more, because really it's quite easy to build an ADU now and to legalize it right now. So if anyone is listening and you have one, please come talk to us. And then the last thing I want to say is, just since we won't see each other for a few months, I want to thank you all for all of you for your time and your attendance and your dedication to this. It means a lot, and I hope we get something positive out of this. Well, we have so far, in my opinion, and I hope it comes to more fruition as we move forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you for those announcements, and thank you to you and Chris for all the work. With that, we are at adjournment. As noted, we will reconvene when we have direction from council, and that's expected to be in the next calendar year. So we will see everybody then, and the notice will go out of that meeting. So we will resume discussions when we have direction. Thank you all. We are adjourned.